The roar of the crowd was a living thing. It pressed down from every tier of the Colosseum, a wave of sound that shook the dust loose from its stone bones. Sunlight bled across the arena floor, gilding the sand that had already drunk too much blood. Chains clattered as the gates opened, and Kale stepped forward. His armor was dented, one shoulder guard missing, the other hanging by a strap, and the sword in his hand had been reforged so many times it looked older than the arena itself. But his eyes were clear, bright against the grime of his face. Somewhere above, a horn sounded, long, deep, and final. The crowd fell to a hush that seemed to tremble with expectation. Across the arena, the other gate opened, and she emerged. The alien gladiatrix, taller than Kale by a head, skin a vivid blue streaked with lines like cracked porcelain glowing from within. Her hair was bound in white braids, her armor burnished bronze fitted to her sinewed frame. The crowd erupted again, chanting her name, Syraxa, Syraxa. She was their champion, the undefeated huntress of the Empire's blood games. Her eyes, pale as ice, found Kale instantly, and something like anger or curiosity sparked within them. When she drew her blade, the sound wasn't metal, it was closer to thunder breaking. Kale tightened his grip, rolling his shoulders once. "Let's get this over with," he muttered. Syraxa advanced first, her steps measured but heavy, like a drumbeat before a charge. Kale waited until she was within reach, then sidestepped the opening strike, sand kicking up in a golden arc. Her sword cut through where his head had been a heartbeat before, slicing the air with the hum of energy. He countered low, aiming for her leg, but she twisted, catching his blade on the guard of hers. Sparks spat between them. Her strength nearly forced him to his knees. He grimaced, pushing back with a roar. The impact rang through both weapons before they sprang apart again, circling, testing. Around them, the crowd screamed for blood. Syraxa's voice cut through the noise, cold and precise. "You shouldn't still be alive, human." Kale grinned despite the sting in his arm. "I get that a lot." She lunged again, faster this time. He barely caught her strike, but the force spun him halfway around. She followed with a knee to his ribs, and the air fled his lungs in a ragged gasp. He fell, rolling to avoid the next blow, her sword biting deep into the sand beside his ear. The heat, the dust, the noise, everything blurred into motion and instinct. He kicked upward, catching her off balance long enough to scramble back to his feet. His heart pounded against bruised ribs. She came at him again, relentless, fury and grace in motion. When she struck this time, her blade carved across his chest, cutting shallow but precise. Blood welled, hot against the dry air. The crowd roared its approval. Kale staggered back, clutching the wound, then raised his sword again. "You'll have to do better," he rasped. Her eyes narrowed. "You bleed too easily for such arrogance." She lunged, faster than before, and drove her sword into his side. Pain flared, white and blinding, but he caught her wrist before she could pull free. Their eyes locked, hers glowing, his burning, and through clenched teeth he laughed. "Bad habit." Then, in one brutal motion, he twisted her wrist, forcing her to drop the weapon, and smashed his forehead against hers. The crowd gasped as both staggered apart, blood mingling with sweat on the sand. Syraxa's breathing deepened, her expression shifting from disdain to something sharper, almost fascinated. "You fight like a creature that doesn't understand dying," she said. Kale wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of red. "I've had practice avoiding it." She retrieved her blade, slow and deliberate. "Then today, I'll teach you how." The air shimmered between them as heat rose from the floor. Kale steadied his stance, lowering his sword slightly. The ache in his side was spreading, his vision tunneling at the edges. But there was no fear left in him, only focus. If he was going to die here, it would be on his own terms, not theirs. The next clash was a blur of motion and fury. Every strike echoed through the arena, steel screaming against alien alloy. Kale ducked under one swing, rolled behind her, and slashed across her backplate, denting it. She spun, snarling, countering with a strike that tore open his pauldron and bit deep into his shoulder. The pain should have dropped him, but it didn't. He met her eyes and smiled again, wild, defiant. "See? Still here." Her frustration broke through composure, and she drove forward with a roar, hammering blow after blow. Each impact sent vibrations through the ground, forcing Kale back step by step until his heels hit the arena wall. The crowd screamed louder, chanting for the kill. Saraxa raised her sword for the final strike. "Fall, human," she commanded. Kale looked up at her, blood running from the corner of his mouth. "Can't," he said. "Bad habit." The blade came down, and he caught it between his palms. The edge split skin, but he held it, pushing with every last shred of strength. The energy from her weapon seared his hands, smoke rising where metal met flesh, but still he held. Something flickered in her eyes, hesitation, disbelief. He twisted suddenly, driving the sword off its line, and slammed his elbow into her throat. The strike wasn't lethal, but it sent her stumbling back, coughing, furious. The crowd fell into shocked silence for the first time. Kale stood swaying, chest heaving, body shaking from exhaustion. "You fight to kill," he said. "I fight to keep going. That's the difference." She wiped blood from her lip, watching him with something almost like respect. "You fight to remember," she said quietly. "You're not here for glory." He blinked, startled by the insight. "And you are?" Her expression hardened again. "I'm here because they tell me to be." She glanced toward the royal box above, where the Empire's banners fluttered. "You're here because you chose to die in defiance. We are not so different." Kale laughed once, bitterly. "Difference is, I get to laugh about it." She lunged again without warning, catching him across the side. He barely blocked, the impact sending both of them sprawling. Dust rose, sunlight breaking through the haze. When they locked eyes again, they were both on their knees, blades pressed against each other. For a long moment, neither moved. Around them, the crowd's noise grew distant, like a storm receding. "End it," Kale muttered, his strength fading. "That's what they want." Saraxa's grip tightened. "And what do you want?" "To stop being their entertainment." He coughed, blood staining the sand. "To die for something that matters again." She looked down at him, then at the stands, where the nobles leaned forward eagerly. Slowly, she lowered her sword. The silence that followed was louder than any roar. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Kale blinked, confused. "What are you doing?" She met his gaze. "Breaking my chains." In one smooth motion, she turned and threw her sword, straight into the royal box. The weapon struck the Emperor's throne, splitting its crest. Chaos erupted instantly. Guards rushed forward, the crowd screaming in confusion. Saraxa grabbed Kale's arm, hauling him to his feet. "Move," she hissed. "You wanted to fight for something that matters, now's your chance." Together they ran, dodging arrows as they struck the sand around them. The arena's gate slammed shut, but Saraxa leapt, driving her fist into the locking mechanism. Sparks flew, metal screamed, and the gate burst open. Beyond the arena lay the city, vast, golden, alive with alarm bells. They fled through narrow streets, chased by shouts and the echo of boots. Kale stumbled, clutching his wound, but she kept him moving. "Why are you helping me?" he gasped. "Because," she said, eyes fierce, "you refused to die when everything said you should. That's something this empire has forgotten." They ducked into an abandoned forge, the sound of pursuit fading for a moment. Kale sank against a wall, breathing raggedly. "You just threw away your life for me." "No," she said quietly, "for the choice to make my own." He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time saw not an enemy, but someone just as trapped as he had been. She turned toward the window, watching smoke rise from the Colosseum's distant arches. "They'll call us traitors," she said. "They'll send hunters. Then we'll give them a story worth remembering," Kale said, forcing himself upright. "If we're going to run, might as well make it count." Her lips curved slightly. "You humans and your bad habits. Keeps us alive," he said. "Most of the time." She laughed, a sound rough from battle but real. "Then let's see how long this one lasts." The sun dipped low, throwing long shadows through the broken city. Two figures, once enemies, now moved together through the dust toward something neither could name but both could feel, the first steps toward freedom. The desert wind cut through the alleys like a living blade, whistling between the crumbling walls of the lower city. Kale and Saraxa moved in silence, their footsteps muffled by the dust that never seemed to settle. Behind them, sirens wailed and metal footsteps echoed across the upper tiers, patrol drones sweeping every road that led away from the Colosseum. Smoke curled up in black ribbons from the arena's shattered gates. Somewhere inside that chaos, the Empire's order had begun to crack. Kale limped beside her, one hand pressed against his side, blood soaking through his tunic. Every breath scraped like glass. Still, when Saraxa glanced back, he grinned faintly. "Told you. Bad habit." She didn't return the smile. "Keep moving," she said, scanning the rooftops. "They'll follow the heat trails." He chuckled softly, though the effort made him cough. "You mean they'll follow you?" She gave him a sharp look, the faint glow of her scars brightening beneath her armor. "You think too much for a dying man." "I think just enough to know you didn't plan this," he said. "You threw your sword before deciding what came next." Her silence answered for her. The tension between them felt like a drawn bow, uneasy, alive, and somehow fragile. "We'll need supplies," she said finally. "And a way out before dawn." "Got anywhere in mind?" "The old Forge district," she said. "No one goes there. Too haunted." He raised an eyebrow. "I like haunted." They slipped through a half-collapsed market, past stalls littered with broken trinkets, and the smell of spice turned sour. The city above them, once beautiful, now loomed like a predator made of stone. Every corner hid the threat of soldiers. Kale's vision blurred, the pain in his side a constant reminder of how close he'd come to dying twice in the same day. Saraxa caught his arm as he stumbled. "You can't bleed this much and keep standing." He smirked. "You'd be surprised what humans can do when embarrassment's the alternative." "You're ridiculous," she muttered, but her tone carried reluctant respect. They ducked into an abandoned courtyard, its fountain dry and cracked. Saraxa knelt beside him, tearing a strip from her sleeve to wrap his wound. Her touch was steady but impersonal, though he saw the flicker of something uncertain in her eyes. "You were never supposed to fight us," she said quietly. "The humans of the outer colonies were given peace treaties." "Funny thing about peace," Kale replied. "Depends on who's defining it." She tied the makeshift bandage tight, ignoring his hiss of pain. "Your empire bombed our moons," she said flatly. "That wasn't peace." He stared at her for a moment. "My empire." She looked up sharply, realizing the mistake. "The empire," she corrected. "The one that owns both our lives." He nodded slowly. "That one I recognize." She stood, scanning the empty street. "Rest. 10 minutes. Then we move." "You're the boss," he muttered, closing his eyes. When he opened them again, the light had shifted. Sunset bled across the city, casting it in shades of bronze and ash. Saraxa stood near the archway, sword in hand, watching the horizon. For a moment, she looked carved from the same material as the world around her, unyielding, sharp, and utterly alone. Kale pushed himself upright. "You ever get tired of surviving?" She didn't turn. "Survival isn't a choice," she said. "It's what's left after all the choices are gone." He leaned against the wall. "You sound like someone who stopped believing in better endings." "I believed once," she said softly, "before they made me kill for applause." The quiet stretched between them until the wind broke it. "Then let's make them regret giving us an audience," he said. They left the courtyard and moved north through the old forges, where molten rivers once ran through stone channels. Now, only the skeletons of smelters remained, their chimneys crumbling toward the stars. Saraxa found an entrance beneath a collapsed arch and led him into a cavernous workshop. Rusted machines slept beneath tarps, and the smell of oil and dust filled the air. "We'll hide here tonight," she said. Kale lowered himself onto a crate, grimacing. "Reminds me of home. A forge. A ruin." She almost smiled. "Your people really don't change, do they? We evolve. Badly." He reached for his side again, wincing. "You didn't have to drag me out of there, you know." "I did," she said. "You're proof they're not gods." The sound of her voice carried something he hadn't heard before, conviction mixed with something else, a quiet rage buried under control. She moved around the forge, gathering scraps of metal and worn tools, her movements efficient. Kale watched her in the flicker of a dying lantern, noticing how her armor no longer gleamed but looked almost human now, dented, imperfect. "What happens when they find us?" he asked. "They will," she said simply. "Then we fight again." "That's your plan?" "That's my habit," she said. He laughed softly despite himself. "You're learning. Don't flatter yourself, human." She stopped to look at him, her eyes glowing faintly. "You think this is rebellion? It's not. It's delay. They'll rebuild the games, with or without us." "Maybe," Kale said, "but it only takes one spark to burn down an empire." "And you think you are that spark?" she asked, skeptical but curious. "Not me," he said, meeting her gaze. "Us." She studied him for a long moment. "You really believe that?" "Belief's another bad habit." The faintest smile touched her lips, and then it was gone. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the desert. The first storm in months was coming. "Sleep," she said, extinguishing the lamp. "Tomorrow we run again." He lay back against the cold stone, listening to the hum of wind through the ruins. When sleep came, it brought memories of battlefields and faces he'd long tried to forget. But this time, among them, he saw hers, bright, fierce, and unbroken. The storm hit before dawn. Lightning painted the sky silver, rain hammering the roofs like war drums. The noise woke Kale instantly. Saraxa was already standing by the door, armor fastened, eyes scanning the horizon. "They are close," she said. He rose, grabbing his sword. "Drones." "No. Hunters." The word carried weight. "Special units," she explained. "Trained to capture or kill defectors. They won't make noise. They won't miss." Kale nodded grimly. "Guess we should give them something to miss." The first shadow moved through the rain, sleek, four-legged machines with glowing red visors sweeping across the ground. Kale and Saraxa ducked behind the forge wall as bolts of energy tore through the metal. "They brought half the city." Kale shouted. "You're popular. Shut up and move." They burst through a side door, sprinting across flooded streets as the rain turned the dust into mud. Kale slipped, caught himself, and kept running. The hunters leapt from rooftops like mechanical predators, their claws sparking against stone. Saraxa turned mid-stride, slicing one in half with a single upward swing. Its remains crashed into the mud, electricity sizzling in the puddles. "Keep going," she shouted. "There's a transport bay ahead." They reached it, an enormous hangar built into the cliffside, half collapsed but still powered. Old ships lined the docks, some scorched, others intact. Kale staggered to a control panel, slamming his hand on it. "Please tell me these relics still fly." "One might," she said. "But we'll need time to power it. Then buy it." She turned back toward the entrance as another wave of hunters advanced, glowing through the rain. Her blade ignited along its edge, blue fire meeting metal. "I'll hold them," she said. "You fly." "That's not how this works." "It is now." He hesitated, then stepped beside her. "We'll both buy time." Her glare softened, just slightly. "Bad habit," she muttered. "Yeah," he said. "Best one I've got." They fought side by side, the rhythm of survival turning into something more, an understanding forged in fire and mud. Kale's sword moved slower than hers but struck with purpose, every motion she made complemented his instinctively. The hunters fell one by one, their red lights extinguished under the storm's fury. But more kept coming, endless and mechanical. Finally, the ship's engines roared to life, shaking the hangar. Saraxa turned. "Go." "Not without you. You'll die here." "Then so will you." Her eyes flashed. "You infuriating creature." "That's what they tell me." Another blast hit the wall, scattering debris. "Now or never," she shouted. They sprinted for the ramp as energy fire sliced through the air. Kale stumbled halfway up, the pain in his side flaring, but Saraxa caught him by the arm, hauling him aboard. The hatch sealed behind them as the ship lifted. Through the rain-streaked window, they watched the hangar collapse under the weight of explosions. The hunters vanished in the firestorm below. Kale fell into the pilot's chair, laughing breathlessly. See? Told you it'd fly. Saraxa leaned against the wall, breathing hard, the glow of her scars pulsing faintly. You're insane, she said. Comes with the species. And yet you live. Told you, he said, grinning. Bad habit. She shook her head, though a ghost of a smile tugged at her lips. Where will you go? Anywhere that's not here, he said, checking the coordinates. You. Wherever the fight leads. He glanced at her, then back at the stars ahead. Then maybe we'll make a habit of that too. The ship climbed higher, breaking through the storm clouds into clear night. Below them, the Empire's capital burned faintly on the horizon, a wound bleeding light into darkness. Above, the stars waited, cold, endless, and full of promise. For the first time in years, Kale didn't feel like running away. He felt like running toward something. Saraxa looked out the window, her reflection mingling with the starlight. They'll call us monsters, she said quietly. Maybe, he replied. But monsters don't get to write the ending. We do. The ship angled toward the edge of the system, engines flaring brighter. Neither of them looked back. Behind them, the Empire searched its ashes for order, never realizing that its first fracture had already taken flight. Two fugitives, human and alien, bound by defiance, carrying the one thing tyranny could never crush. Hope. The stars stretched above the cockpit like endless mirrors, reflecting the chaos they had left behind. Kale leaned against the worn control panel, feeling the pain from his wound pulse in time with the ship's engines. Saraxa sat across from him, knees drawn to her chest, blade resting against her shoulder. She traced the edges of the metal with her fingers, deep in thought, the glow of her scars faint beneath the dim console lights. Silence fell over them like a shield, both aware that what had just occurred in the city below was only the beginning. Kale exhaled, letting the weight of exhaustion settle. So, what's next? He asked quietly, voice hoarse from shouting and laughter. Saraxa's gaze remained fixed on the stars. Next, she said slowly, is surviving until someone remembers we exist. The words carried a chilling truth. They were fugitives from the Empire now, and nowhere would be safe for long. Kale's grin was faint, but the spark remained. Good thing humans are good at surviving, he replied. Some of us, anyway. Her eyes flicked to him, sharp and measuring. You underestimate how many others will try to stop you. They will follow, even across systems. Kale nodded, already calculating odds, plotting courses. Then we make it harder for them. They'll find we're not easy prey. She allowed a faint smile. You may be insufferable, but you are persistent. The hum of the ship's engines filled the cockpit, steady and reassuring. Kale adjusted the controls, scanning for a system free from the Empire's reach. There's a cluster about 3 jumps out, he said. Mostly unclaimed. Could be a safe haven to regroup. Saraxa's lips pressed together. Safe, she said, is a relative term. He laughed quietly. I've been chasing relative my whole life. Finally found someone who understands it. She looked at him sharply. Understand what? The thrill of survival, he said. The way it makes you feel alive when the world wants you dead. She studied him in silence, as if weighing whether to believe him or not. Finally, she nodded once, sharply. Then we'll see if that feeling lasts. As they jumped into hyperspace, Kale allowed himself a moment to reflect. The city below was burning, but that fire had been the first spark of change. Humanity, alien or otherwise, survived by adaptability, by defiance, by refusing to fall. He had laughed through blood in the arena, a sound that had been met with shock, with disbelief. That laughter had kept him alive when logic would have told him he should die. And now, in the cold vacuum of space, he felt that same defiance coiling through him, ready for whatever came next. You ever think, he asked, about what we'll do if we find a real fight? Saraxa's gaze remained distant. I have fought real fights, she said quietly. This is just the first of many you will encounter. Kale's brow furrowed. Many. Empires do not forgive, she said. Those we've angered will not stop at a single city. The ship shuddered as the hyperdrive stabilized, casting faint blue shadows across the cockpit. Kale leaned back, exhaling slowly. Then we keep moving. Always forward. That's the only habit worth keeping. She finally turned her head to look at him fully. You speak like someone who believes they cannot die. Not believe, he corrected. No. Learned the hard way. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional navigation adjustment or the faint groan of the ship. Cale watched stars streak past the viewport, feeling a strange calm settling over him. The universe stretched infinite, full of threats, yes, but also possibilities. Saraxa remained close, blade at her side, eyes glowing faintly as she scanned the ship's systems. Occasionally, she would speak, softly, deliberately, offering advice on maneuvers, on calculating risks. Cale listened, soaking it in. Their partnership had grown from survival instinct to something else, trust forged in combat, tempered by mutual defiance. It was not friendship yet, but a bond stronger than any promise of allegiance. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently, throwing them against the consoles. Warning lights flared. Cale's hand flew to the controls. What now? Saraxa's eyes narrowed, scanning the readouts. Sensors detect a pursuit, she said. Not drones. A ship. Fast. Armed. Cale gritted his teeth. Of course. Nothing says peace like someone chasing two fugitives through unclaimed space. He activated evasive maneuvers, twisting the ship through asteroid fields, the metal groaning with each sharp turn. Saraxa leaned into the console, adjusting weapons and shields. They are skilled, she said. Not just bounty hunters. Elite operatives. Cale's grin widened. Then this should be fun. The first volley of plasma struck the hull, sending sparks and small fires across the cockpit. Cale maneuvered, rolling the ship in an arc that dodged several shots. Saraxa countered with precise bursts, tearing chunks from the pursuing vessel's armor. The exchange was chaotic, but exhilarating. For the first time in days, Cale felt alive in a way he hadn't since the arena. Never thought I'd be happier in a firefight than when I was fighting for my life, he shouted. Saraxa didn't respond immediately. She was focused, calculating. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she activated the ship's emergency thrusters, sending the vessel spinning in a controlled tumble that threw the pursuers off balance. Bad habit, Cale said, laughing, even as sweat stung his eyes. You too. Hours melted into each other as they evaded their pursuers, weaving through asteroid clusters, debris fields, and the faint remnants of destroyed colonies. Each maneuver required precision, trust, and intuition. Cale's wound throbbed steadily, but adrenaline and habit kept him functional. Saraxa's movements were precise, efficient, almost predatory. They worked as one entity, anticipating each other's reactions without needing words. Every near miss, every explosion, strengthened the bond that had formed in the arena. Cale realized he had never fought with anyone like this before. She was not merely a warrior, she was a force, a companion, and perhaps, something he was only beginning to understand. Finally, they reached a small system on the edge of known space, a cluster of planets that appeared uninhabited and undisturbed. Cale exhaled, allowing the tension to drain slightly. Think they'll follow us here, he asked. Saraxa shook her head. They may track the hyperdrive signature, but it's unlikely they know this system exists. We have a chance to recover. Cale allowed himself a faint smile, leaning back in his seat. Recovery. That sounds almost civilized. She smirked faintly. Almost. They landed on the third planet in the cluster, a barren world with wide plains and scattered rock formations. The ship's engines hissed as it cooled. Cale climbed out first, stretching cramped muscles. The planet was quiet, too quiet, save for the occasional hiss of wind across the plains. Saraxa followed, scanning their surroundings. We'll stay here, she said. For a short while. The Empire will not give up, and eventually, they will find us again. Cale looked at the horizon, seeing the twin moons hanging low. Short while, he repeated, is fine by me. They set up temporary shelter, tending to wounds and salvaging supplies from the ship. The day faded slowly, and with it came a rare moment of calm. That night, Cale sat on a rocky outcrop, looking up at the stars. Ever wonder, he said quietly, if there's anyone else out there who fights like us? Saraxa sat beside him, her armor reflecting faint starlight. There are others, she said. But few survive. Most are lost to glory, or the lack of it. Kale chuckled. Then I guess it's lucky we're stubborn. She glanced at him, a faint flicker of amusement in her eyes. Stubbornness is a survival tool, she said. But it can also get you killed. I'll take my chances, he replied. Bad habit, she muttered again, smiling faintly. Sleep found them uneasy, curled beneath the minimal shelter they'd constructed. The wind carried whispers across the plains, like echoes of distant storms. Kale's dreams were vivid, filled with arenas, flames, and the faces of those he had fought, lost, or spared. Yet among the chaos, Saraxa appeared, blue, fierce, unbroken, reminding him that defiance was not merely survival, but a choice. When he awoke, the first light of the twin suns painted the plains gold and crimson. The world was silent, but tense, as though waiting for the next move. Kale rose, ready to continue. Saraxa joined him at the edge of the shelter. We'll need to keep moving soon, she said. There are resources ahead, and perhaps allies who can aid us. Kale nodded. Allies. I've been alone long enough. Maybe it's time I find someone to fight beside me willingly. She didn't reply immediately, but a faint smile ghosted her lips. Perhaps, she said, you'll find more than fighting companions. Kale tilted his head, curious, but said nothing. The horizon stretched endless before them, full of danger, possibility, and a future they would carve themselves, step by step. The ship rested in the shallow canyon, engines cooling. Kale gathered supplies while Saraxa performed maintenance on their weapons. He watched her, noting how careful she was, precise, efficient. There was no trace of hesitation, her instincts were honed to perfection. You could teach me that, he said, hefting his blade. She glanced up, expression unreadable. And risk turning you into a weapon. Better than being dead, he replied. Her lips twitched. I suppose that is your type of bad habit. And one worth keeping, he said. The twin suns rose higher, painting both in the sharp light of morning. By midday, they were on the move again, crossing the plains toward the distant mountains where rumors of a hidden outpost had reached her ears. Each step carried the weight of survival, of defiance, and of the bond forged in blood and laughter. Kale adjusted his pace, matching her stride. You ever tire of fighting? He asked quietly. She shook her head. No. Fighting is choice, not instinct. Instinct leads to death. Choice leads to freedom. He considered her words, thinking back to the arena, to the laughter through blood, to the moments that had defined him. Then let's keep choosing, he said. She glanced at him, nodding slowly. Always, she replied. The wind shifted as they approached the mountains, carrying a hint of ozone and metallic tang. Kale tightened his grip on his sword, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline. Saraxa's eyes glowed faintly, scanning the horizon. They will find us eventually, she said, but not yet. And until then, we move. Together. Kale looked at her, smiling faintly through dirt and blood. Together, he agreed. The horizon stretched endless, dangerous, and alive, full of challenges they would meet side by side, carving their own path in a universe that had tried to dictate their end. The mountain pass loomed before them like a jagged spine, sharp peaks cutting into the fading light. Kale and Saraxa moved cautiously, each step measured against the risk of ambush. Loose stones shifted beneath their boots, echoing faintly against the cliffs. Kale's side throbbed constantly, a dull reminder of the wounds that refused to slow him. Saraxa moved ahead, scanning the path with precision, her glowing eyes slicing through the dimming sun. The air was thin, the wind slicing past them like blades. Kale grinned faintly, testing his endurance. I see why they say this route is cursed. Cursed? She asked, without turning. Her voice carried faintly, sharp as the wind. It's not cursed. It's watched. He raised a brow. Watched. Every step we take, she said quietly, leaves a trace. They are waiting, hunters, patrols, and worse. The Empire does not forgive fugitives lightly. Kale let the words sink in. He knew survival had never been about skill alone, it was about reading the world, understanding threats before they struck. He flexed his fingers around the hilt of his blade. Then we make sure they regret it. Saraxa glanced over her shoulder, expression unreadable, then nodded faintly. Yes. But remember, The difference between surviving and dying here is patience and precision, not bravado. The path narrowed as they ascended. Jagged rocks jutted from the cliffs, forming natural obstacles and choke points. Kale's boots scuffed against the stone, dislodging pebbles that clattered down the slopes below. Each noise made him flinch, though Saraxa seemed unaffected. She stopped, crouched, and gestured forward. Quiet now. There is movement ahead. Kale flattened against the cliff wall, scanning the shadows. A patrol of armored soldiers moved carefully along a ridge, weapons bristling, scanning for signs of passage. He whispered, "Hunters." "Yes," she confirmed. "And scouts. They will try to flank us." Kale nodded, eyes narrowing. "Then we flank them first." The ambush was swift and brutal. Kale leapt from cover, blade striking in a controlled arc that forced the first scout to stumble. Saraxa followed, her own strikes precise, deadly, cutting the second pursuer off before he could react. The clash of metal rang across the pass. Kale's muscles screamed, every motion testing the limits of his injuries. Still, he fought, weaving between her movements, striking only where opportunity presented itself. Together, they moved like a single unit, anticipation and instinct melding perfectly. The patrol fell, one by one, until silence reigned. Kale gasped for breath, sweat and blood mixing on his skin. "Too loud," Saraxa muttered, surveying the bodies. "We cannot leave traces like this. They will track us." Kale exhaled, lowering his blade. "Then we clean up," he said, glancing at the corpses. "Bad habit," she whispered, shaking her head, though a small, amused smile touched her lips. He shrugged, wiping his blade on his tunic. "Keeps me alive." They moved onward, careful now, slower, deliberate. Every step became ritual, soft, measured, precise, until the sounds of pursuit faded behind them. The cliffs above glowed with the first light of dawn. Kale allowed himself a brief moment to watch, feeling the warmth of sunlight against his skin. The pass ended at a plateau that opened into a narrow valley, its walls carved from black stone streaked with glowing veins. The terrain was alien, the light refracted strangely across the surface. Kale's grip tightened on his sword. "Looks like the kind of place no one visits by choice." Saraxa nodded. "It is the edge of Empire territory. Few come here, and fewer survive the journey. Good for us." Kale smiled faintly. "Then let's make sure we survive it." She stepped ahead, leading him down a winding path between stone spires. Every step echoed across the valley, though somehow the echoes seemed swallowed, absorbed. The world felt alive here, aware of their presence, and Kale sensed it watching, weighing, testing. By midday, they had reached a plateau above a hidden canyon where the ruins of an ancient outpost sprawled below. Crumbled towers and broken walls spoke of battles long forgotten, of empires rising and falling. Kale exhaled, surveying the landscape. "Perfect hiding spot," he muttered. "Or perfect trap," Saraxa countered. The wind stirred, carrying a faint metallic scent. Kale's instincts screamed. "Hunters." "Scouts," she replied. "But not the same as before. These are trained to anticipate ambushes. We must be cautious." He nodded, understanding the stakes. This was no longer a chase, they were entering territory where mistakes meant death, where one misstep could undo all their hard-won survival. They descended carefully, moving among the broken structures, avoiding open spaces. Kale's side throbbed with every motion, but he forced himself to focus. Saraxa's pace was deliberate, each step calculated. They reached the main courtyard, and Kale paused, noticing a faint shimmer along the far wall. "Cloaking devices," he whispered. "Probably," she said. "Or illusions. This place is old, but traps remain. Do not trust your eyes." Kale gritted his teeth. "Good thing I trust my instincts more." They advanced, careful, silent, moving like shadows. Every moment demanded attention, every decision carried weight. The valley was alive with danger, yet strangely, with potential. In the heart of the ruins, they discovered a small chamber, partially intact. Inside were supplies, old but preserved, and a functioning communications relay. Saraxa moved to inspect it. "This could serve as a temporary base," she said. Kale nodded, dropping his pack. "Then we fortify it." Rest, recover. Prepare for whatever comes next. She glanced at him sharply. Your wound is worse than you admit. He flexed his hand over the side, wincing. Pain keeps me awake. Keeps me alive. She shook her head. Humans and their bad habits, she muttered, though the edge of a smile touched her lips. Rest now, soldier. The next hunt will be unforgiving. Night fell quickly in the canyon, shadows stretching long across the ruins. Kale and Saraxa kept watch in shifts, taking turns at the outer perimeter. The stars above seemed impossibly bright here, untainted by city light, infinite in their reach. Kale allowed himself a rare moment to gaze upward, thinking of battles past, of laughter through blood, of the moments that had shaped him. Saraxa remained close, leaning against the wall, her blade resting at her side. Her eyes reflected the stars faintly. You think we'll survive long enough to see freedom? Kale's lips curved faintly. Freedom isn't given. It's taken. And we're persistent. In the hours that followed, the first hints of pursuit reached them. Distant lights flickered along the canyon's edge. Scouts, smaller than the previous patrols, testing their position. Kale checked the blade in his hand, its edge still sharp. Saraxa scanned the perimeter, glowing scars faint against her blue skin. They'll try to find a pattern, she said. We must not provide one. Kale nodded. Then we stay unpredictable. Move fast, strike harder, vanish. She smiled faintly, approving. The night stretched on, tense, alive with potential and threat. They had survived battles, hunts, and ambushes. They would survive this. They had to. By dawn, the scouts had withdrawn, and the canyon returned to silence. Kale and Saraxa moved to the chamber's entrance, preparing to continue their journey. The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of ozone, metallic tang, and rain. What's next? Kale asked, eyes scanning the horizon. Forward, Saraxa said. Always forward. Every choice, every strike, every laugh through blood, forward. Kale grinned, adjusting his grip on his sword. Forward, then. The twin suns rose behind the cliffs, painting the valley in shades of gold and crimson. Together, they moved, step by step, toward the unknown, warriors, fugitives, and survivors bound by defiance and bad habits, ready to carve a path in a universe that had underestimated them. The canyon stretched endless before them, shadows receding beneath the light of the rising suns. Kale and Saraxa moved cautiously, their steps measured, attuned to the rhythm of the world around them. The Empire's reach would eventually catch up, but for now, the valley belonged to them. Kale's side throbbed persistently, a constant reminder of survival through pain. He glanced at Saraxa, noticing the faint glow of her scars beneath the armor, pulsing gently with the rhythm of her breath. The bond they had forged in combat, in laughter through blood, now felt unbreakable. Even in silence, they moved as one, anticipating each other's instincts. The ruins behind them gradually disappeared, swallowed by the low fog rising from the valley floor. Ahead, a distant ridge marked the border of another system, a cluster of outposts forgotten by the Empire. Kale's eyes swept the horizon. We'll be safe there, he asked quietly. Saraxa didn't answer immediately. Safe is relative, she said finally. But it's our best chance. He nodded, understanding that survival was never absolute, only earned. Then we make it count, he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. She glanced at him, approving, though her expression remained guarded. Every step we take from here defines the next. Forward, human. Forward. They descended the ridge, careful to avoid loose stones and the occasional shifting slab. Kale felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the same sharp awareness that had kept him alive in the arena, in the chase through the city, and along the treacherous mountain pass. Saraxa moved beside him, precise, deliberate, scanning for threats, her blade always ready. They were no longer gladiator and hunter, they were partners in survival, each step echoing a shared understanding forged in fire and blood. Kale marveled at how far they had come, from laughter through pain to this tenuous peace. The universe had not made it easy, but that challenge had been their teacher. As they reached the valley floor, the wind shifted, carrying the faint metallic tang of machinery. Kale froze, hand on the hilt of his sword. Scouts, he whispered. Saraxa's eyes narrowed, glowing faintly. Trained hunters, she said softly. They're testing, probing, looking for weakness. Kale's grin returned faintly, despite the pain. Then let's give them a show they won't forget. The first volley of energy bolts struck the valley floor, sizzling in the dust. Kale ducked, rolling to avoid a blast, and countered with a precise slash that disarmed one of the scouts. Saraxa moved like a phantom, cutting, striking, and vanishing again into the shadows. The battle was chaotic, but controlled, a dance honed by countless moments of survival. Hours passed as they fought their way through the scouts, retreating strategically while maintaining offensive pressure. Kale's wounds throbbed relentlessly, yet each strike, each maneuver, reinforced his resolve. Saraxa's movements were flawless, but Kale noted a subtle shift. Her energy, while still precise, carried hints of fatigue. He adjusted his approach, protecting her flank, ensuring she remained uninjured. They moved together, seamlessly, anticipating the other's attacks before they arrived. The valley echoed with the clash of energy blades, the hum of engines, and the shouts of distant pursuers. In the midst of it all, Kale laughed through blood again, defiance burning brighter than any pain. By nightfall, the scouts had been repelled, retreating toward the distant mountains. Kale and Saraxa stood atop a rocky rise, surveying the battlefield. The valley was scarred, pockmarked with craters, twisted metal, and scorched earth. Yet they had survived. Kale's chest rose and fell heavily, each breath a testament to endurance. Saraxa wiped blood from her hand, glancing at him with a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "You never stop, do you?" she asked. Kale grinned, leaning against his blade. "Habit," he said simply. "Bad habit," she replied, shaking her head, though her lips curved in approval. Together, they gazed at the horizon, knowing the Empire would not relent, but also knowing they were far from defeated. The following days were spent moving across the valley, navigating the broken landscape while avoiding patrols and remaining hidden from the Empire's scouts. Kale and Saraxa established temporary camps in natural caves, rationing supplies and tending to their injuries. The bond between them deepened, built not on words but on shared struggle, trust, and the understanding that survival was both art and instinct. Kale reflected on how far they had come, from the arena where death had been an expected visitor, to the open plains where each step was a calculated choice, to the mountains where endurance and cunning had become as vital as the edge of a blade. One evening, as twin moons rose, casting silver light across the valley, Kale and Saraxa reached a small, fortified outpost. It was abandoned, but structurally sound, and offered shelter from both the elements and the Empire's gaze. Kale leaned against a wall, surveying the place. "This will do," he said. Saraxa moved to the perimeter, scanning for potential threats. "For now," she replied. "The Empire will eventually find us." Kale nodded, accepting the truth. Survival was temporary, but endurance, persistence, was eternal. They had fought through impossible odds, and that habit, that instinct to continue, was something the Empire could not understand, let alone break. That night, they sat outside the outpost, the valley stretching into darkness beyond. The air was cool, scented faintly with dust and ozone. Kale traced the twin moons with his eyes, reflecting on battles past and the moments that had defined him. Saraxa remained close, her blade resting on her lap, scars faintly glowing beneath her armor. "Do you ever tire?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "Fighting is not tiring. Only forgetting is dangerous." Kale nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Their survival was more than physical. It was mental, emotional, a test of will and persistence. They had learned to endure, to laugh through blood, to fight when all else seemed lost. In the following weeks, Kale and Saraxa fortified the outpost and prepared for the inevitable return of the Empire. They trained daily, honing their combat skills, testing strategies, and pushing the limits of endurance. Kale's wounds healed slowly, but the constant movement kept him alive, alert, and dangerous. Saraxa remained his equal, sometimes his superior, always his companion. They had become a singular unit, understanding each other's movements, anticipating thoughts, and blending instinct with strategy. Their laughter returned occasionally, sharp and bitter, cutting through the tension like a blade. Bad habits, Kale thought. But they were necessary. Finally, the day came when scouts returned, probing the perimeter cautiously. Kale and Saraxa met them with precision, striking swiftly and decisively. Their movements were a combination of brute strength, cunning, and coordination, refined by countless battles. The scouts fell before realizing the full measure of their opponent's skill. Kale laughed through blood again, victorious and defiant. Saraxa glanced at him, a hint of amusement breaking through her otherwise serious expression. "You are impossible," she said. "And yet, I would follow you anywhere." He smirked, wiping sweat and grime from his brow. "I'll take that as a compliment." The Empire's forces withdrew, temporarily deterred, leaving Kale and Saraxa to consolidate their hold over the outpost. They surveyed the valley below, watching for any signs of pursuit. Kale leaned against the battlements, feeling the wind on his face. "We've survived," he said quietly. Saraxa joined him, shoulders brushing his. "For now," she replied. "And when they come again, we will be ready." Kale nodded, understanding that survival was a habit, persistence a skill, and defiance an art. They had faced death countless times and had laughed through blood to endure. Now, they would continue, carving a path forward together. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Kale and Saraxa stood side by side. The world around them was scarred but alive, a testament to endurance and will. The Empire would return, inevitably, but they were no longer the same individuals who had entered the arena. They had become a force, a combination of human ingenuity and alien precision, united by defiance and survival. Kale's eyes glimmered with the same stubborn spark that had kept him alive countless times before. Saraxa's gaze, unwavering and resolute, met his. Together, they would face whatever came next, a testament to bad habits and unwavering persistence. When the first stars appeared in the night sky, Kale allowed himself to relax, for only a moment, feeling the weight of survival and the taste of freedom. Saraxa leaned against him slightly, a silent acknowledgement of shared endurance. Around them, the outpost breathed, alive with the pulse of energy they had forged, ready to withstand the next challenge. Kale thought back to the arena, to laughter through blood, to every strike and counterstrike that had led them here. And he knew, survival was not mere chance. It was habit, persistence, and choice, carried forward through every scar, every laugh, every defiance against the impossible. The night deepened. Across the valley, the wind whispered through the stones, echoing with memories of battles past and the faintest glimmer of hope for the future. Kale's hand rested on his sword, Saraxa's on hers, both steady, both ready. The Empire may return, but they were no longer prey. They were hunters of their own destiny, bound by blood, defiance, and an unbreakable habit of persistence. Kale looked at her and smiled faintly. "Bad habit," he murmured. She met his gaze, a faint smile on her lips. "Best one we've got," she replied. Together, they turned toward the horizon, ready to meet the unknown, step by step, strike by strike, laughing through blood, alive against all odds.